What up, y'all? How you doing? Hope you just joined me for that double inhale breath work with a mantra meditation. If not, or if so, let's start this one with a simple breathwork tool, the alternate or unilateral nostril breathing. So covering one side and breathing in fully through the other. Switching sides. I hope you see how simple that is. If you can get yourself to remember to do it throughout the day, then you're playing a winning game, right? That's something you can do at basically any time. There's no activity that you could really be doing that you can't fit that in. So if at the very least that's the only thing you did, it would there's a astounding health benefits to something just as simple as that. So if you could get that in a couple of times a day, even if you only did one side, even if you only did the side that your breathing naturally switches every 30 minutes for one side or the other in order to regulate your hormones. So if you only were breathing through the side that you could breathe through easily, then that would still be fine. So again, yeah, so simple. You can do it. So what does that do? Part of what it does is get you away from ego, or get you away from the ego, bring you towards egolessness, right? I don't think that it's really possible to eradicate the ego. I'm not sure that that's a pursuit even worth a pursuit even worth pursuing. Um, but you are either in ego or you are in awareness. You are never in both at the same time. So you want to be in awareness, right? The observing of the observer, where you're able to watch yourself from a depth within yourself. Most people don't know that that even exists, and that comes through awareness. And your ego will absolutely run you if you allow it to, even if you're trying not to allow it to. It still has a lot of say, quite literally, in how you think about things, how you think about the world, right? But everyone knows awareness, right? Many people are able to harness it, and it's called many different things. It's called like focus, or it's called presence, or flow state, right? That is harnessing awareness. You can you can feel that awareness in moments when you are the first exact moment when you're going to fight or flight or freeze, right? Let's say you're about to get hit by a car. What is it that gets you out of the way? It's not your ego. Your ego needs to sit there and think about it and calculate. No, it's your awareness that makes a decision in real time. So you want to be in awareness, right? Awareness has that primal understanding of the universal principles that we're governed by, right? Things like physics. And people are in awareness when they play sports for the very most part, right? The ego will still get in the way. The ego will have you thinking when you're up trying to hit a 95-mile-an-hour fastball. The ego will have you think you can make a certain throw as a quarterback that your awareness knows you really can't, end up throwing interceptions, something like that. But in a certain speed, right? Like a certain speed of like professional sports speed or like NASCAR driving, certain speeds bring out awareness. So I say that just to say we've been talking about the ego a lot, and I'm going to share my screen and just look at a little chart about it where you can kind of get a better idea of what it is that I'm talking about when we talk about the ego. And when I'm talking about it, I'm mainly talking about it from a Sigmund Freud perspective. Sigmund Freud got a lot of possible errors in how he saw things, but this is something that seems to hold up for sure is the different levels of your consciousness regarding yourself. And it's the pretty much everyone I feel like knows the iceberg analogy where when you see an iceberg, you only see the tip of the iceberg, right? And the rest of the iceberg is underneath the water. That's how we deal with our ego. Like most people are dealing with less than 5% of their consciousness. So that's what people really are talking about when they say, like, what if you could access your whole brain? And you do access your whole brain. That's the thing. It's just not your whole brain works at the same time. Just different areas of it are specialized for certain things. So you are using your whole brain. However, you're not, and that's kind of assuming that your brain is your consciousness, which it doesn't seem to be. But you're not operating as a fully conscious being. You're 5% of where you're operating at on a conscious level is being run by your ego. And your ego is what is causing you to pretty much do everything that you do, but particularly your habitual actions. It has you respond the same way to the same event each and every single time. It has you get defensive about your opinions. It has you be extremely opinionated, especially about things you know nothing about. It has you do things that aren't producing the outcome that you desire, right? It's the definition of insanity where you do the same thing over and over and over again, expecting a different result. So then you get those results, you're unhappy with those results, and you continue to do it. That's your ego. Your ego is trying to keep things status quo because for many different reasons. Like the ego, it's not to be demonized, right? It got us here. It's done its job was to get us here, but now it's still operating as if we were naked in Africa, and we are not naked in Africa anymore. So it's still operating like that, and it's not very helpful for the type of society we most of us now currently live in. So when you are able to tap in to your deeper levels of consciousness, right? There's 95% of you, most likely that you've never met. And that is, that could be very exciting, right? There's a seemingly infinite depth of yourself that you can meet. And the ways to do that is you have to break your habitual chain reaction. You have to your whole life to this moment is a tsunami, right? It's a whole wave of momentum that you've built that you didn't necessarily mean to build, and now it is behind you, propelling you forward. So in order to change anything, you would have to change the line that you're currently moving in, right? And you could do that in such a slight way that nobody really notices, including you. You can trick yourself into taking the smallest possible changes, but the difference is this line is going to bring you exactly where you've already gone, and this line is going to bring you somewhere new, right? And over time, that compounding change in direction brings you somewhere you would have never been if you didn't consciously change your behaviors. So again, that could be exciting. Most people get overwhelmed by that, say, "Oh, I can't change. I can't do this. I can't do that," and they start making a list of why they can't change what's currently going on. That's your ego. Your ego is running you. And again, that's, as very surface level. There's an infinite depth of you that can do so much more than you even possibly know, right? Unless you've ever pushed yourself to the point where you drop dead, and in that case, you are not watching this, then you don't know how far you can go. You don't know what you can do, what you're capable of. So saying can't is really, it's silly. It's just a protection mechanism, and it's you don't need to be protected. You don't need that protection. You can face the fact that you can do a lot more than you currently are doing. So more about the ego. The ego gets you in that line, right, where you just follow this line of being for eternity. So many people just follow that line all the way to their grave. The ego has people say, right? I say to people all the time, "Well, what do you want?" And every time I've asked that question, people tell me, "Well, I'll tell you what I don't want." Literally, just like that. I'll tell you what I don't want. I ask the question, "What do you want?" And they say, "Well, I'll tell you what I don't want." And they'll give me 7 things, right? Bam, I don't want this. I don't want that. I don't want this. I don't want that. And then you say, "Wait, I asked what you do want, and you told me what you don't want. That doesn't even make any sense." And then you ask them again, "What do you actually want?" And boom, it's like, "Oh, wow, never thought about that." If you never thought about what you want, how could you possibly get it? How could you possibly orient yourself towards the goal and the outcome you're trying to get if you've never even thought about it? That's the ego. The ego has you thinking about worst case scenarios, all the things that could possibly go wrong. And again, that's helpful, right? They say in business, only the paranoid survive. They say, I mean, let's take it back to being in Africa and being a small tribe, right? And maybe you have fire, maybe you don't have fire at this point, right? We're weak little humans. We're literally small. We were under 5 feet for a long time. We were matched with all types of predators and poisonous reptiles and poisonous spiders, and just rough. But really, probably our main competitors are other apes and other humans, and we gotta constantly be thinking. Our ego is constantly saving us and thinking of what's the worst case scenario. What if something happened right now? What would I do? What weapon would I grab? Where would I run? Who's got my back? Who doesn't? Right? All those kind of things. But now we live in the safest time in the history of humanity, we can drop the ego a little bit and get into who we really are, right? The space between thoughts. Your ego is having 100,000 thoughts a day, all ego. And your ego is monkey mind, right? So do you want to be associated with your monkey mind thoughts, or do you want to create some space between thoughts, create some space where you can have a new thought? Imagine that, not just the same repetitive thoughts you've been having. You can have a new thought, which can lead you to a completely different life than the one you were on track for. So just, an oversimplification of what the ego is about. And hopefully that helps you a little bit. What I really want to talk about today is reverse aging, of course, because that's the thing I really am passionate about. Like, for myself, almost my entire life is oriented around reverse aging, anti-aging, because I'm primed to not do it. I don't have any interest in it. I know that there's so much science and technology coming that there's no reason to age. And I also know that all the technologies that I've talked about are things that we don't need science for. There's things that are as thousands of years old that we can incorporate into our lives that stop and reverse aging. So yeah, so that's what I'm interested in talking about. I've been talking about that for a couple of years. I've been writing papers on it for a couple of years, reading books on it, and doing lots of research because that's what I'm interested in. And I would say definitely people would look at me crazy, think that that's crazy. I thought it was crazy. It is crazy, but that doesn't mean I'm gonna stop talking about it. That's the thing to talk about to me, I think. I mean, what if you could live for way longer than anyone else is or has, right? Wouldn't that be interesting? Wouldn't that be fun? Um, wouldn't it be great to be healthy for so long that you don't decay, right? I have no interest in decaying. I really like using my body, mind, and doing the things I do. And I really like to be able to do them for indefinite future. So that being said, this is still, people are still way behind on this. People have still never heard of it, and it's shocking to me, but whatever. Um, two guys who are at the forefront of this, a guy named Brian Johnson, and he is he created Venmo, I believe, and I believe he created PayPal as well. But he has since sold both of those things, and he's worth $800 million. So he has the time and inclination to live, forever. But he has his own neurotech company called Kernel, and he has 30 doctors on his payroll, most of which are neuroscientists, and they are all specialized for working on him, working on his DNA, working on his nutrition, his fitness plans, and it's working, right? We don't know what's working, but as a total, his thing called Blueprint is working. He has reversed his age to a 17-year-old. He is in the 1.5% of 18-year-olds in physical fitness. And he he hasn't ceased entropy, but he's ceased it seemingly as much as possible, where for every year now, he's only aging 8 months. So, and that is actually less aging damage than the average 10-year-old, right? Because kids age slower than older people. So, or they recruit aging damage slower than older people. So, still Brian Johnson is he's doing it, and I got a lot of respect for it. You know, people think he's crazy, people think he's a freak, but I think that's really just because we are so far off as a society from caring about our health that when someone does it, you know, people one, they're gonna hate on them because they not doing it, and because they're not going to stop doing the self-destructive behaviors that they participate in, and also because they like to do it, and they don't have the resources or the discipline. So yeah, so that's working for him. Obviously, it's really amazing. It's very inspiring to me. And then we got David Sinclair, the author of this book, Lifespan: Why We Age and Why We Don't Have to. And that dude is like, I think he's like 55 years old. He's a professor at Harvard. And he has reversed his age by 30 years. So, you know, not as amazingly as Brian Johnson, but look, this dude is not a billionaire. He's a professor. And he has really made it simple where, you know, dude mainly fasts a lot, 20 to 24 hours daily. He's cut out sugar completely. We've talked about how menacing sugar is on the body. And like, you know, once in a while he'll have a couple bites of this or a couple bites of that. But most people's lives are oriented by their next sugar intake. So he's also, both of those dudes are vegan. Now that's kind of coincidental, or Brian Johnson's not doing it because he believes meat is bad for you or anything. He's doing it more as an environmental thing. And then David Sinclair is doing it because if you look at all the oldest populations around the world, it's mostly old women, you know, in their 100+ year olds, and they mostly eat plant-based protein, and they'll have like fish a couple times a week, maybe. And yeah, so the majority of their diet is things like spinach and blueberries and things of that nature, fruits and vegetables in particular, without pesticides and preservatives, if you can imagine that. So yeah, that's really what they got going on. But Sinclair has really just made it very simple, where he only eats one meal a day. He eats a late lunch, essentially. I think he eats dinner around 4:30, 5 o'clock, to give himself the most time before sleep and to digest, but also to really just eat a light meal, eat a healthy meal, and get the maximum amount of fasting in per day. Now he drinks liquids a lot throughout the day, stays hydrated, also keeps it helps keep you off of the idea that you need to eat something. So he drinks a lot of tea, particularly matcha. He drinks, you know, a cup of coffee and lots of water. And yes, it's obviously working for him. Both of those dudes on calorie restricted diets. They eat, I believe, less than 2,100 calories per day. And the thing about that is food tastes way better when you don't eat that much of it. So, you know, so many people say, well, I love food. It's like, yeah, but most people are like eating, they're watching TV, they're not even focused on the food. You know, they're talking to people with their mouth full. You're not even enjoying the food. It's just like constant habitual behavior that ends up being of a self-sabotage nature. So again, one thing on that is most people think that their genetics are predetermining their existence, and that is 100% not true. Most genes are not deterministic. So what that means is your genes interact with their environment, right? And that plays a huge role in the ego as well. That voice that is turned on is mostly turned on by people's opinions. Lots of times people's opinions of you, whether it be your mother, your father, your siblings, your friends, or whatever. Those thoughts that you're hearing, like 98% of them, until you reach a point where you stop and you get, a little more consciousness, you become a little more thoughtful in that moment, and you're able to kind of self-reflect, then 98% of those thoughts coming in are not even yours. So you're following a path that is governed by your monkey mind, and most of those things being said in your monkey mind aren't even things that you believe or that you would say. It's opinions you heard that you're recycling, or perceived guidelines for your life that maybe your mother, your father, whoever imposed on you. So that seems pretty useless. It seems like it would be nice if you ask yourself what you want, and we're able to filter through and throw out all the garbage that is other people's thoughts and opinions on you. And then you can begin to put yourself in the best possible environment going forward for your genes to interact in a way that is mostly calm when you can be, but also stressful where you're putting yourself into stress on purpose, right? Like we talked about with exercise, is putting yourself into beneficial stress on purpose. Cold tubs, cold showers, saunas, getting in the ocean, things like that. And that will determine how your genes are expressed, right? You're not a slave to your genes. And that's pretty new. Like I think it was within the last 20, 25 years, and it's not even really mainstream yet, that the fact that your genes are not determining your existence. Your genetics are not determining the diseases that you get, right? They say, well, what's in your lineage, right? It doesn't help to have people who, have passed those genes onto you, but it is not correlation. The correlation, like just because your mother, your father, or whatever, they had cancer, doesn't mean you're going to get cancer, right? The biggest 99% of cancer is environmental. So it's the stress throughout your life that creates the cancerous cells, right? And maybe a lot of that isn't really up to you, because for the most part at the beginning of your life, you don't choose where you're born, who you're born to, what environment you end up in. A lot of that is not your choice, not your decision. But once you know that genes are not deterministic, then it is your responsibility to place yourself in environments that are best for you, for the best possible outcome for you. And with that, I'll wrap up in this episode. And thank you again for joining me. Really appreciate it. Covered a lot right there. Covered a lot of things that I'm interested in. Please like, comment, subscribe. Leave some comments. Tell me what you think, and tell me what you would like to hear me talk about next. All right, y'all. Peace out.